and it got much worse after Obamacare started. Because before, the employees used to give them a little bit of medical, but since Obamacare, the employees completely stopped giving him any kind of health care.
There were a couple of women. I remember seeing that, and I also saw it on the news. A couple of women from like West Virginia. They had a big mobile van.
Yeah, they're running. Yeah,
and one was a nurse practitioner. The other one was a technician. I'm not sure.
Well, they're both the nurse practitioners.
Right, and they said they didn't take anything. People wanted to give them, something, anything. And they did it like 3 or 4 days a week. They were out on the road.
And, they had volunteer doctors that when something was more serious, they couldn't.
The one thing that came out of that show was that at least somebody donated a brand new medical van to them because their van was being held together by duct tape.
Yeah. It was an old Winnebago.
Yeah, basically that's what it was.
Yeah.
But it was like one of the old, the library, the bookmobiles that would come around in your neighborhood if you couldn't get to a library.
But what they were showing, though, was what Obamacare did to West Virginia. Just whatever they...
But that's the reality, though, because West Virginia is a poor state, so the majority of those people didn't have coverage. So with Obamacare, they looked at it like, wait a minute, with the price of health care coverage, I might as well pay this fine because that's too expensive for me. So it didn't help them at all. So there's a lot of poor people who are deciding to pay the fine. And then the middle class who used to have health care, because their rates went up, they're like, well, hell, I don't know if I want to keep it now. So you have a lot of people who are looking at this like, wait, this is way too expensive to even handle. And the problem it was supposed to solve, it just didn't. It solved the problem of the healthcare industry not making enough money. So
you are very right, because the numbers that they gave you when they first came out with Obamacare was based upon a certain number of people buying into the system, and people just weren't buying into the system. Young single people who figured I'm healthy said I'd rather pay the fine, like you just said. Okay, other people who had families who needed it couldn't afford the premiums, so they went without.
And they paid the fine.
And then people who I wouldn't even say, middle class, which is now like lower middle class. Okay, the premiums were way out of range for them. And the government, of course, was lying and saying you can keep your doctor, you can keep your policy, you can do this. That was a bunch of junk. That wasn't true.
Yeah, well, remember when I was arguing about that the whole time?
I remember. Yes, I do.
I fought Mark.
He was in that.
Nail. I said, "There's no way this plan is going to work. It's just going to make things so much worse." And
because who always gets hurt in the end? The middle class gets hurt in the end. That's why.
I remember when I
middle class and the poor. The real answer is it should have been a system like England, like Canada, a real single-payer system. They weren't willing to do that. Obama never put it on the table because he was making the deal with the healthcare industry. So we got what we got. But the American people, the poor American people, the story that's written about them, when you start looking into it, what you find is that most of it is just a big lie. So all of these white people who they said weren't concerned with health care, you bring a clinic around, like you said in Youngstown, they line up. So obviously they are concerned about it. They tell me black people in the inner city don't want to work. And you put up a job fair that has, the lowest level jobs or whatever. There's a line around the damn building. People out there in their Sunday's best trying to get these basic minimum wage jobs. So it's like, wait a minute, you told me these people didn't want to work. So how come every job fair I see this? So what the lies about the poor are probably the biggest problem we have, because then that justifies the poor not being able to get the real things that they need, which is training, ability to work somewhere, and opportunity.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'll tell you.
All the handout stuff, that's for somebody else. Let me tell you, if you cancel food stamps tomorrow, Tyson Foods and all these big conglomerates would be knocking at your door and telling you to turn that stuff back on, because it's guaranteed money for them every month and they depend on it. The grocery store would be knocking at the president's door because they need it. They need it more than poor people do.
That's very true.
I'll tell you, I'm marking myself with both of retirement age. I'm saying retirement age because I still work, but then Mark is retired. And through all this time, this is the first time since Obama came in, Obamacare, that I really had issues with health care. When I was making more money, less money, no matter what situation I was in, it was never a big issue. Just the minute Obamacare came in, all of a sudden it became an issue every day.
Well, because as the gentleman just said, what we really should have is single payer, and they didn't want to push that because it was too expensive.
But what I'm saying is before Obamacare was better for most people.
I wouldn't say most, though. See, that's a slice of people. It wasn't most. That's why people were so adamant behind it, because they thought they were going to be able to get access, like the majority. But that story you guys told about West Virginia, and you could do that story all over the country, because I read a story about California where they had the same type of clinic situation. And you can find that all over the country.
Listen, I
didn't have it throughout my 20s. I was a single guy. I said, man, I'm not paying for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Listen, I live in New York. I live in Long Island. This is supposed to be middle class area, I guess, upper middle class maybe. In Long Beach, they have Doctors with No Borders. I have a clinic open.
Well, but you know why? Because ever since Sandy, they have no hospital anymore.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying. But they're
same
not
thing in Rockaway.
But they're not charging. They have free, what kind of crazy government do we have? You need that. And, even before they had Obamacare and all that, if somebody didn't have money, they go to the emergency room and had the problems taken care of, cost them nothing.
But you see, that's one of the things.
Medicaid, and they were still getting billed, though. The hospital just wasn't ever getting the money back.
Exactly. I'm just saying, but it's basically no. I'm just saying. I mean, what do you think? Most of the immigrants that come in here that are illegal immigrants. Where's this emergency room? I have a sore throat.
Well, for the first thing, that was it. They used the emergency room as their primary care physician
because you're not. And the law is you're not allowed to refuse anybody.
Right.
So I don't know why they even bother.
Let me tell you something about that emergency room, though, man. If you go in there and you ain't bleeding or got a bone poking out, it's going to be a long wait if you're going to try to use it.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've all been there for 6 hours, at a clip.
Well, you see the people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you see the people that are used to it, that come with their kids, that come with lunch bags and their radios blasting, and they're just sitting there, waiting for the doctor.
The only thing they don't have is a blanket to put on the floor and make it a picnic,
I mean, it's a shame, What the cheapest way of handling is give the government a few cents to take care of the people in the hospitals that come in and just take care of them, and that's it, That or give everybody Medicare, like Bernie says.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, those are the only real solutions for us to decide, okay, health is a very serious thing. We need to put money into it. And don't tell me we don't have the money, because we could take it out of the Department of Defense. Period. We've got it. We just don't want to use it.
Now, listen, every other country, basically in the modern world, whatever you want to call it, they have basically free medical, and it costs them, government, so much less than it costs us.
Well, but you see, in America, what they complain about is they say that this is the country where the research and development goes on, the scientific research and development. And that's what you're paying for in the long run.
Well, you're saying that, but I'll tell you, people who have medical issues, they'll go to Germany, they'll go to France, where all the newest stuff is.
Yeah, but I knew somebody who had he was Canadian, and he worked for an American firm, and he lived in the States. And when once a year he would go up to Canada and have all his dental work and everything done, as long as it wasn't an emergency. But if it was an emergency, he'd come down to the States and use his American insurance, Okay, because otherwise you had to wait weeks in Canada before you were seen by a doctor, and by then it would have been too late.
Well, not for emergencies, I'm sure.
I don't know.
Listen,
yeah, I've heard anecdotal stories like that, but from what I understand, just their policy, just in real practice, if you have something debilitating or like a serious thing going on, then you're going to get taken care of. But everything else, yeah, there will be a wait. Like if it's anything cosmetic or if it's anything that's, not
not
really,
life-threatening.
Emergency, it's going to be a wait. But
wait a minute, you mean
it's better than no care at all? Like our situation is, you can't afford it. Well, oh well, you know what I mean? So,
well, the way they do it in...
You mean I have to wait months before I get my shot of Botox?
That's it.
Gee, what a ripoff!
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, they in Canada and in a lot of places in Europe, a lot of the people who have a little more money give the doctors like $2,000 a year as standby money, so they can get an appointment anytime.
Well, there are retirement communities. Take Florida. This has become very big in Florida, and I know all the way out on the island in the Hamptons, where the real fancy rich people live, they have concierge medicine, where if you pay, of course you have to be able to afford it. You pay like $10,000 a year, and the doctor comes to you. You never get a bill, okay? But the bottom line is, once you pay that, that's how much it costs to belong to this and utilize their services, okay? But how many people can afford to do that?
Sounds like Medicaid.
Right.
Well, Medicaid, they have a lot of doctors.
We have a tiered system, kind of like our justice system. If you can afford it, you can get good legal representation. If you can afford it, you can get good health care. That's where we want to be. That's my question.
That's why if you are depending upon legal aid to do your defense, you got to figure you're going to be doing some time behind bars. Whereas if you have a little bit of money and you hire your own attorney, it's called let's make a deal.
Well, even with that's why they say if you have legal aid, okay, what's the deal? What's the prosecutor offering?
Let me tell you, my friend's son is an attorney. He started out working as an ADA in one of the boroughs in New York, okay, and then he went over to the dark side. Now he does defense. He works for himself, okay. And some of the people that he defends are like the lowest of the low. And they come into him, okay, with cash on the barrel, all right? And they'll tell him, listen, I know I'm guilty, but he said, I'll do a nickel, meaning I'll do 5 years. But he said, if they're starting to talk 10, forget about it. He says, you get me down to 5 years, he says, I'll take that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, it's true. Matter of fact, I think I told you this gentleman that was wanted to do some work with us is a retired lawyer. Used to live in Howard Beach. I don't know if you've you know anything about Howard Beach. That's what like John
Gotti. I know the infamous story about it.
Yeah, John Gotti and all that.
No, but he's referring to the black boy who was beaten by those white kids with baseball bats.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, that's back during the 70s.
Yeah, but anyway, John Gotti and that whole mafia scene was living there, and then this lawyer's had a small practice, and his brother became an assistant district attorney. And all of a sudden, his clientele rose 1,000% in this little office, and he said he had to quit. He said, they come in, they give him a whole bunch of money, and they said, "Get my brother, talk to your brother, there, get me off," And these guys are coming in with guns and stuff, and he said, "The hell with this, I'm out of here," and he quit. Well,